All the women fell for the Korean Mafia boss in his club, except the black bartender he really wanted. Nights at the Obsidian pulsed like a heartbeat beneath Seoul streets. Neon lights cut through the haze, washing velvet booths and crystal glasses in shades of feverish pink and smoke blue. Laughter mixed with bass. Perfume clung to the air. Every soul there came chasing something, power, thrill, or the illusion of love. At the center of that storm sat Ji-hun Kim. Untouchable. Impossibly calm. The heir to a dynasty that ruled half the city's underworld. He didn't have to speak to be obeyed. One look from those black amber eyes made the crowd orbit him like planets around a sun they feared to touch. Women hovered close, their dresses shimmering as they smiled too brightly, laughed too hard, each one hoping to be chosen. Ji-hun barely noticed. Power was routine. Attention, exhausting. Then there was Maya Jefferson. 3 months behind his bar, and she still hadn't given him so much as a real glance. She slid between customers with effortless grace, her hands creating art from bottles and light, eyes cold, measured, indifferent. Not flirtatious. Not afraid. Just focused. Her silence tore through the noise more loudly than any music he owned. Ji-hun told himself it was annoyance. It felt a lot like fascination. The first time Ji-hun actually watched her work, really watched her, something tightened in his chest. Maya moved with a precision that bordered on violence, sharp turns, decisive pose, brutal efficiency. No wasted motion. No performance. Just raw competence that made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. Like if you're already feeling the chemistry. Comment where you're watching from and if you think she'll resist or fall for him. Subscribe now, this steamy collision of worlds is just beginning. He'd hired her because his club manager said she was the best mixologist in Seoul. Not the prettiest. Not the most charming. The best. Ji-hun had learned long ago that excellence was the only currency that never depreciated. What the manager hadn't mentioned was her absolute refusal to play the game everyone else in the Obsidian lived by. 3 months, and she still treated him like a stranger. Like his name wasn't etched into police files and whispered in fear throughout the district. Like the gun beneath his tailored jacket was invisible. That night, he sat at the bar instead of his usual booth. The VIP section emptied instantly as his entourage followed. Whispers rippled through the club. Why was Kim Ji-hun sitting at the bar? What was happening? Who was in trouble? Whiskey. Neat. His voice was soft, almost gentle. The kind of gentle that preceded violence. Maya glanced at him once, expression unchanged. Any preference? Surprise me. She turned away, selecting a bottle without hesitation. No nervousness. No trembling hands. When she set the glass before him, her eyes finally met his fully. Hakushu 18. Japanese, not Korean. But you strike me as someone who appreciates precision over patriotism. Then she moved away, attending to other customers, leaving him with a glass and an observation that cut too close to truth. He sipped slowly, watching her over the rim. The whiskey was perfect, smoky, complex, uncompromising. Just like her choice. For the first time in years, Ji-hun felt something like curiosity stir beneath his ribs. In a life where everyone was either predator or prey, Maya Jefferson seemed to exist outside the food chain entirely. The next night, he returned to the bar again. The gleaming black surface reflected the neon above, transforming ordinary movement into underwater ballet. Maya moved through it all like a creature born to darkness, completely in her element while remaining utterly separate from it. Her white shirt crisp against dark skin, silver watch catching light as she poured, mixed, created. Always in motion, never rushed. Always surrounded, never touched. How long have you been in Seoul? He asked when she passed by again. 2 years. No honorifics. No deference. Just facts. And before that? New Orleans. Then New York. She was already moving away, mixing something complicated for a customer down the bar. Her accent carried faint traces of southern warmth buried beneath city sharpness. Like honey crystallized into something that could cut. Ji-hun found himself wondering what her voice would sound like, relaxed, unguarded. If it ever was. Around him, his security detail watched with careful neutrality. They never questioned his choices, but he could feel their confusion. The boss at the bar, night after night, watching a woman who showed no interest. It didn't fit the pattern. It disrupted the careful balance of their world, where women were either entertainment or invisible. The club's regular patrons noticed too. Eyebrows raised. Whispers spread. Speculation bloomed in dark corners. Was she his new favorite? His latest obsession? Was there a connection they didn't know about? Money exchanged hands in quiet bets about how long before she ended up in his bed or disappeared completely. Ji-hun let them wonder. Let them whisper. Their speculation was meaningless background noise to the far more interesting puzzle before him. One night, a group of businessmen took seats at the bar, already drunk from dinner elsewhere. Expensive watches. Designer suits. The casual cruelty of men who believed money excused behavior. One of them leaned too close to Maya as she served their drinks. "Where'd Ji-hun find you?" "Africa." His voice carried just enough to reach Ji-hun's ears. Exotic imports are his newest interest. Maya's expression didn't change. Not a flicker. Not a flinch. She simply placed his drink down with precise force, just hard enough that liquid sloshed over the rim onto his sleeve. "Apologies," she said, voice flat. Hand slipped. The man's face darkened. "You little problem?" Ji-hun interrupted, voice carrying despite its softness. The table froze. The businessman paled, suddenly remembering whose club he sat in, whose air he breathed. "No, sir. Just a small spill. Then I suggest you clean it up and apologize to my head bartender for your carelessness." The command hung in the air, absolute. The man stammered an apology that Maya didn't even acknowledge, continuing her work as if he didn't exist. Later, when the club had emptied and the cleaning staff worked in silence, Ji-hun found her counting bottles in the storeroom, clipboard in hand. "You didn't need to intervene," she said without looking up. "I handle worse every night." "I know." He leaned against the doorframe, studying her. "That wasn't for you." Now she looked up, really looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then what was it for?" "My boundaries," he said simply. "Some things aren't tolerated in my club." "Your club?" She repeated the words like they tasted unfamiliar. "Is that what this place is to you? Just territory?" The question caught him off guard. No one asked him things like that, direct, uncalculated questions about how he saw the world. "It's one of many," he answered finally. "But yes, territory matters." "And people?" Her eyes were steady on his. "Are they territory too?" The air between them thickened with unspoken accusations. Ji-hun recognized the challenge in her question. The moral judgment beneath the surface. Most people feared him too much to judge. Most people weren't Maya Jefferson. "People make choices," he said quietly. "Territory doesn't." She studied him for a long moment, as if calculating something complex. Then she simply nodded and returned to her inventory. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement that she'd heard him. It wasn't enough. For the first time in years, Ji-hun felt the strange discomfort of being dismissed. Of being seen but not understood. He left without another word, anger and fascination tangling like smoke in his lungs. The next evening, she wasn't behind the bar. His eyes scanned the club twice before he asked his floor manager. "Day off, came the nervous reply. She requested Thursdays permanently. Ji-hun nodded once, face betraying nothing. But inside, something simmered. She was avoiding him. Running. The realization should have angered him more. Instead, it only deepened his fascination. People ran from him out of fear. Maya Jefferson ran from complexity, from conversations that exposed too much. From truth. That night, he left the club early. His driver took him through rain-slick streets to a small, unmarked door in Itaewon. Inside, a different kind of darkness awaited, not the manufactured glamour of the obsidian, but the simple shadow of a neighborhood bar with low lights and worn wood. And there she was, behind a different counter. Same precision. Same focus. Different context. Here, without the obsidian's opulence surrounding her, Maya seemed even more substantial. More real. She looked up as the door closed behind him, and for a split second, genuine surprise cracked her composure. Then the mask returned, smooth and impenetrable. "We're closed in 20 minutes, she said when he took a seat at the bar. "Then I'll have something quick." The few remaining patrons glanced nervously between them, sensing the tension crackling in the air. One by one, they finished their drinks and left, until only silence remained. "How did you find me?" Maya asked finally, wiping down the already clean bar. "I own buildings. You sign leases." He shrugged slightly. "Seoul is smaller than it seems. And what brings Seoul's most notorious businessman to a neighborhood dive bar on a Thursday night?" Her voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. Curiosity. The truth slipped out before he could shape it into something more strategic. "You work for me 6 nights a week but request Thursdays off to work somewhere else. Why?" Maya set down her towel, facing him directly. "Because this place is real. The people are real. They drink because they're happy or sad or tired, not because they're playing power games or hunting status. And they see me as a person, not as..." She trailed off. "Not as what?" he pressed. "An accessory. A piece of the environment. A prop in someone else's story." The bitterness in her voice was sudden and sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. Ji-hun absorbed the accusation silently. Was that how she saw her position at the obsidian? As his prop? "You're more than that," he said finally. "Am I?" Her laugh was short, humorless. "You don't even know me." "I'd like to." The words emerged unbidden, honest in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. Maya stilled, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Why? What could you possibly want from someone like me?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. What did he want? Sex. Power. The thrill of conquest. Those were the currencies his world traded in. But sitting here, in this simple bar with its scarred wood and honest shadows, those answers felt hollow. "Authenticity," he said finally. "In my world, it's rare." Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps. Or recognition. She opened her mouth to respond when her phone buzzed loudly on the counter. Glancing at the screen, her expression hardened. "I have to lock up now." The moment had passed, the wall rebuilt. Ji-hun nodded, leaving cash on the bar that would cover every patron's tab for the night. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. "The obsidian isn't all games and illusion," he said quietly. "Some things there are real too." She didn't answer, already turning away to close the register. He left without looking back, the night air cool against his face. Something had shifted between them, not broken, not yet connected, but changed. The next night, she returned to the obsidian, professional as always. But now when their eyes met across the crowded room, something new lingered in the glance, a shared secret, perhaps. Or a mutual challenge. Weeks passed. Ji-hun continued his silent observation from the bar. Maya continued her perfect performance behind it. But small changes emerged in their carefully maintained distance. Sometimes she would place his whiskey before him without being asked, selecting a different rare bottle each night that somehow matched his mood. Sometimes he would notice details about her, a new hairpin, tired eyes, a barely perceptible limp, and ask brief, careful questions that she answered with equal care. They were building something fragile between the cracks of their established roles. Not friendship. Not romance. Something unnamed that existed only in glances, in whiskey selections, in the careful measure of personal space maintained between them. The women who had once competed for Ji-hun's attention noticed the shift. Their desperation took on a sharper edge, perfume heavier, laughs louder, touches more insistent. As if volume could compete with authenticity. As if persistence could replace what they lacked, the ability to see him as something other than power and wealth wrapped in expensive suits. One of them, Ji-na, the daughter of a politician, beautiful and calculating, approached Maya at the bar during a quiet moment. "Whatever you think you're doing with Ji-hun, it won't last," she said, voice sweet with poison. "He collects interesting things until they bore him. Then he discards them." Maya continued polishing a glass, unbothered. "Thanks for the insight." "He's not looking for an equal," Ji-na pressed, perfect nails tapping against the bar. "He's looking for a novelty. The foreign bartender who doesn't worship him. Once you break, once you want him back, the game ends." Maya finally looked at her, really looked, with eyes that had seen too much to be intimidated by pretty cruelty. "Is that what happened to you?" she asked quietly. Ji-na's face flushed with rage. "You don't know what you're playing with, little bird. His world eats women like you alive." Maya set down the glass, leaning slightly forward. "And women like you? What does it do to them?" The question hung between them, sharp and dangerous. Ji-na retreated without answering, dignity barely intact. But the encounter left marks, invisible but present. The whispers grew louder. The stares more hostile. The air in the obsidian thickened with jealousy and resentment. Maya ignored it all with practiced ease, but Ji-hun saw everything. Saw how conversations stopped when she approached. How customers made increasingly complicated orders, then complained they weren't right. How other staff began to isolate her, sensing which way the wind blew. One night, after closing, he found her alone on the rooftop terrace where employees sometimes took breaks. The city spread below them, a galaxy of lights against velvet darkness. Maya stood at the railing, shoulders tense, a cigarette burning between her fingers though she wasn't smoking it, just watching the ember consume the paper. "You don't smoke," he observed, joining her at the rail. "I don't," she agreed, watching the cigarette burn. "But sometimes I need to remember what destruction looks like up close." The words carried weight beyond their surface, laden with meanings he couldn't fully grasp. "Ji-na," he said after a moment. "What did she say to you?" Maya glanced at him, surprise flickering across her features. "You saw that?" "I see everything in my club. Not a boast. A simple truth." She turned back to the city view, dropping the cigarette and crushing it beneath her heel. "Nothing I haven't heard before. Women have been telling me to know my place since I was old enough to understand what that meant." The bitterness in her voice cut through the night air, raw and real. Ji-hun felt an unfamiliar urge to comfort, to protect. He suppressed it, knowing she would reject such gestures. "Your place," he said instead, "is wherever you decide it should be." Maya looked at him then, really looked, with eyes that seemed to peel back layers of carefully constructed persona to the man beneath. "Is that what you believe? Or what you think I want to hear? Does it matter?" "Yes." The single word carried absolute conviction. Truth matters. Especially in a world built on lies. Ji-hun considered this, the weight of her moral certainty against the compromise of his existence. "Then yes, I believe it. Your place is your choice." That's why you're here, why I hired you. You don't let others define your boundaries. Unlike everyone else in your world. The accusation hung between them, sharp but not entirely unfair. Everyone in Ji-hun's orbit existed in carefully defined roles: subordinate, enemy, asset, entertainment. Boundaries enforced by violence or money or fear. Except Maya, who carried her boundaries within herself, unshakable and absolute. Yes, he admitted finally. Unlike everyone else. The honesty seemed to surprise her, softening something in her expression. Why do you come to the bar every night, Ji-hun? Why watch me work? Why follow me to Itaewon? What are you looking for? The questions tumbled out, one after another, as if a dam had broken. Questions she'd been holding back for months, finally released into the night air between them. Ji-hun turned to face the city again, finding it easier to speak truth to darkness than to those penetrating eyes. I don't know, he said simply. That's what interests me. Not knowing. In my life, everything is calculated, measured, known. Risks assessed. Outcomes predicted. But you. He paused, searching for words. You're an equation I can't solve. A variable I can't control. And that makes you the most interesting person in my world. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Maya was silent for so long he thought she might not respond at all. When she finally spoke, her voice carried no judgment, only quiet understanding. That's a dangerous thing to be in your world. The most interesting person. Yes, he agreed. It is. She nodded once, absorbing this truth. Good night, Ji-hun. As she walked away, he remained at the railing, watching the city that belonged to him yet somehow failed to fill the hollow space expanding in his chest. Something had shifted between them tonight, not broken, not connected, but irrevocably changed. Then came the night that shattered everything. If you're already feeling the tension between these two worlds about to collide, like this video now. Can a dangerous man who controls everything and a fierce woman who refuses to be controlled ever find common ground? Comment below with your predictions. Will she change him or will his darkness consume her? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens when the one person he can't have becomes the only one he wants. The obsidian was packed, bodies pressed close in artificial intimacy, music pulsing like a collective heartbeat. Ji-hun sat at the bar, watching Maya work with her usual precision despite the crush of customers. The air felt electric, charged with something he couldn't name. Later, he would recognize it as premonition. His security detail noticed them first, 5 men entering too quickly, moving too purposefully through the crowd. Not customers. Not friends. Threats. The first gunshot cracked through the music like lightning through clouds. Screams erupted. Bodies surged toward exits. Chaos bloomed instantly, beautiful and terrible in its raw human panic. Ji-hun moved without thinking, vaulting over the bar as bullets shattered bottles behind him. His hand found Maya's arm, pulling her down sharply as glass rained around them. Her eyes met his, wide with shock but not blind with panic. Stay down, he ordered, already reaching for the gun holstered beneath his jacket. But Maya wasn't listening. She was looking past him, at something on the floor beyond the bar. Following her gaze, he saw one of the young barbacks, barely 20, clutching his bloodied shoulder, exposed in the open service area. Before Ji-hun could stop her, Maya was moving, crawling low across broken glass toward the injured boy. Cursing, Ji-hun followed, shielding her body with his own as more shots rang out above them. The irony wasn't lost on him, protecting someone who didn't want his protection, who had never asked for his involvement in her life. They reached the boy together, pulling him behind the relative safety of the bar's structure. Maya pressed a bar towel against his wound, murmuring reassurances while blood seeped between her fingers. Keep pressure here, she instructed, guiding the boy's trembling hand to the makeshift bandage. Then she turned to Ji-hun, voice steady despite the chaos. "Your people. Where are they?" As if in answer, return fire erupted from multiple positions throughout the club. His security team, moving with practiced efficiency, neutralizing threats. The gunfight was brief, brutal, and decisive. When silence fell again, broken only by whimpers and the distant wail of approaching sirens, Ji-hun knew his side had won. They always did. He looked back at Maya, expecting fear, shock, the natural human response to violence. Instead, he found her still attending to the injured barback, face composed in grim determination. Her hands were covered in blood, yet they didn't shake. "Not your first gunfight," he observed quietly. She met his eyes, something dark and familiar reflected in her gaze. New Orleans wasn't always jazz and celebrations. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared wounds, different yet similar. Both shaped by violence they hadn't chosen. Both survivors in worlds that devoured the weak. Hours later, after police statements and paramedic visits, after the club had been cleared and the injured tended to, Ji-hun found Maya in his office upstairs. She stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The blood had been washed from her hands, but something about her posture suggested it still clung to her skin. "You should go home," he said from the doorway. "It's been a long night." She turned slightly, profile illuminated by the city's glow. Who were they? Rivals. Making a statement. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "It's been handled." "Handled." She repeated the word flatly. "You mean they're dead?" It wasn't a question, so he didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken realities about his world, about who he was and what he did. "Is this what your life is?" she asked finally, turning to face him fully. "Violence and retaliation? Blood and power? An endless cycle of handling things?" Her words carried no judgment, only a terrible weariness that matched the hollow feeling in his own chest. For the first time, Ji-hun found himself wanting to explain, to justify, to make her understand the complexities of the life he'd inherited. "It's more complicated than." "Don't." She raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after tonight." He studied her face, the strength beneath the exhaustion, the clarity in her eyes even after witnessing horror. Maya Jefferson had looked into the dark heart of his world and hadn't flinched away. But she hadn't embraced it either. "What do you want from me, Maya?" he asked quietly. She laughed, a sound stripped of humor. "That's the question, isn't it? What could I possibly want from Seoul's most dangerous man?" She shook her head slowly. "Nothing you're willing to give. Try me." The challenge in his voice surprised them both. Maya stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could smell the faint scent of citrus and blood that clung to her skin. "I want simplicity," she said, each word precise and heavy. "I want mornings without wondering which of my coworkers might get shot. I want to create beautiful things without blood washing them away. I want a life that's mine, not a decoration in someone else's empire." The truth of her words struck him like physical blows. Not because they were cruel, but because they were pure. Untainted by the compromises that had shaped his existence since birth. "Then why stay?" he asked. "Why work at the Obsidian at all?" Something flickered across her face, vulnerability, quickly masked. "Because I needed the money. Because your club is prestigious. Because mixology is art, and you pay for the best." She paused, looking away. "And because I thought I could exist in your world without becoming part of it. I was wrong." Ji-hun felt something cold settle in his chest. She was leaving. He could see it in her eyes, in the finality of her words. Tonight had shown her the reality behind the Obsidian's glamorous facade, and she wanted no part of it. I understand, he said, voice carefully neutral despite the unexpected pain spreading beneath his ribs. I'll have your final payment arranged. Maya nodded once, already moving toward the door. But she stopped before leaving, turning back with eyes that held too much knowledge. You know what's sad? For a moment, I thought there might be something real between us. Something honest. But how can anything true grow in soil soaked with blood? She left without waiting for an answer, the door closing quietly behind her. Ji-hun stood alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of power that suddenly seemed hollow, meaningless. The pain in his chest expanded, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He told himself it was anger. It felt a lot like loss. Days passed. The obsidian reopened, damage repaired, new security measures implemented. Ji-hun buried himself in business, in the brutal efficiency of running his empire. He hired a new head bartender, skilled, deferential, forgettable. The women returned to his booth, sensing opportunity in Maya's absence, offering the same empty flattery as before. Everything returned to normal. Except Ji-hun himself. Something had changed in him, altered by her absence. The club felt hollow now, its glamour thin and artificial. The whiskey tasted flat. The music sounded mechanical. Even the power he wielded, over businesses, over people, over life and death, felt suddenly burdensome rather than satisfying. He found himself driving past the small neighborhood bar in Itaewon where she'd worked Thursdays. It was closed now, a "for lease" sign hanging in the darkened window. Maya had disappeared completely, leaving no trace for him to follow. He could have found her, of course. His resources were nearly limitless. But something stopped him, respect, perhaps. Or the strange, unfamiliar fear of what he might do if he did find her. 3 months passed. Winter settled over Seoul, covering the city in crystalline coldness that matched the hollow feeling in Ji-hun's chest. Business continued, some of it bloody, some of it legitimate, all of it meaningless in a way it had never been before. Then came the invitation. Small, elegant, delivered by courier to his penthouse. The opening of a new cocktail lounge in Gangnam. Exclusive, intimate, focused on craft rather than scene. The name caught his eye immediately, Jefferson's. She had done it. Built something of her own, away from his shadow, his protection, his world. Pride mingled with pain as he ran his fingers over the embossed lettering. She had escaped. Created. Survived. The night of the opening, Ji-hun stood outside the small, elegant building, uncertainty holding him at the threshold. Through the windows, he could see a space that somehow managed to be both sophisticated and welcoming, warm wood, subtle lighting, carefully curated atmosphere. Nothing like the obsidian's calculated excess. This place had soul. And there she was, behind a bar again, but different now. Confidence in every movement. Authority in her posture. This wasn't an employee creating someone else's vision. This was an artist in her element, a queen in her realm. He almost turned away. Almost respected the boundary she had drawn between their worlds. But then she looked up, gaze somehow finding his through the glass, across the crowded room, as if she'd been expecting him all along. Time suspended between them, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. Then Maya nodded once, a slight inclination of her head that might have been invitation or merely acknowledgement. Either way, it was enough. Inside, the atmosphere enveloped him immediately. Warm, intimate, alive with conversation rather than pounding music. No VIP section. No security scanning for weapons. No desperate women watching for his approval. Just people enjoying exceptional drinks in a space created with passion. He made his way to the bar, taking the only empty seat. Maya finished serving another customer before approaching, her expression composed but not cold. Not anymore. Ji-hun. His name in her voice still carried weight, but without the distance of before. Maya. He glanced around appreciatively. You've built something beautiful. Thank you. Simple words, but he heard the pride beneath them. What can I get you? Whatever you think is right. She studied him for a moment, then turned to select bottles with her usual precision. Her movements were the same, efficient, artistic, focused, but there was an ease to them now that hadn't existed before. Freedom looked good on her. The drink she placed before him wasn't whiskey. Something clearer, with herbs floating among perfect ice cubes. New creation, she explained. Gin base. Bitter and sweet. Complicated. He sipped slowly, letting the flavors unfold on his tongue. Complex, challenging, uncompromising. Like its creator. It's perfect, he said honestly. A small smile touched her lips, the first real one he'd ever seen from her. High praise from Soul's most discerning patron. The air between them had changed. The hostility gone, replaced by something quieter. Not friendship, not yet, but the possibility of understanding. I heard about your rivals, she said after a moment. The ones who attacked the obsidian. The news said their organization collapsed. Ji-hun met her eyes steadily. I don't leave threats unaddressed. No, she agreed softly. You wouldn't. Silence stretched between them again, but different now. Not tense, but thoughtful. Both acknowledging the reality of who he was, what he did. I won't apologize for my world, he said finally. But I am sorry you were caught in it. Maya considered this, fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on the bar. I'm not. At his surprised look, she continued, it taught me something important. That I needed to build my own space. My own rules. She gestured around at her lounge. This place exists because I walked away from yours. Pride and pain tangled in his chest again. She had used the darkness of his world as contrast to create her light. Transformed fear into determination. Turned away from his power to claim her own. Then I'm not sorry either, he said quietly. Another customer called for her attention, and Maya moved away, the conversation paused but not ended. Ji-hun sipped his drink slowly, watching her work in her element, commanding her space with the same quiet authority he wielded in his. Different methods, different worlds, but matching strengths. As the night progressed, the crowd thinned. When only a handful of patrons remained, Maya approached him again, leaning slightly against the bar. Why did you come tonight? She asked directly, no game playing, no evasion. The same forthright honesty that had first caught his attention. Ji-hun considered lying. Considered offering some smooth explanation about supporting local businesses or maintaining connections. But those answers belonged to the obsidian, to the world of masks and manipulations. Here, in the clean light of her creation, only truth would suffice. Because I missed you, he admitted. The real conversations. The honesty. The way you saw through everything to what mattered. Something softened in her expression, not pity, but recognition. I missed aspects of you too. Not the danger or the power games. But the moments when the mask slipped. When you were just a man asking questions about whiskey and music and why things mattered. The admission hung between them, delicate and unexpected. Not a declaration of feeling, but an acknowledgement of connection. We exist in different worlds, she continued, voice low enough that only he could hear. Yours is about power. Mine is about creation. They can't fully coexist. But they can intersect, he suggested, the word carrying more weight than he'd intended. Occasionally. Carefully. Maya studied him, really looked at him, in that way that had always made him feel exposed. Intersect how? Like this. He gestured between them, at the bar separating their worlds. Honest conversations. Real moments. No pretense. No expectations. Just two people who see each other clearly, she finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Yes. The simplicity of the proposal hung between them, not romance, not business, not power. Just connection. Rare and valuable because of its very improbability. Maya was silent for a long moment, weighing possibilities against dangers. Finally, she reached for 2 glasses, pouring a finger of whiskey in each. She slid one toward him, raised the other slightly. To intersections, she said softly. Carefully navigated. Ji-hun raised his glass to meet hers, the gentle clink resonating with promise. Carefully navigated, he echoed. They drank in silence, acknowledging the complexity of what they'd proposed. Neither naive enough to believe it would be simple. Neither cynical enough to believe it was impossible. As Ji-hun left that night, stepping back into the cold Seoul air, something had shifted inside him. The hollow feeling remained, but alongside it now grew something unfamiliar. Not happiness, his life had moved beyond such simple emotions long ago. Not peace, his world would never allow for that. But possibility. The chance for moments of authenticity in a life built on calculation. The hope for connections that didn't demand either submission or dominance. The rare opportunity to be seen and understood, however briefly, across the borders of their separate kingdoms. Maya Jefferson had rejected his world but not him entirely. Had drawn boundaries he would respect because her strength demanded it. Had created her own path while leaving a door fractionally open. It wasn't love. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't conquest. It was something far more rare in both their lives, truth. For a man who commanded everything, who controlled vast networks of power and fear, who could have anyone or anything with a word, the freely offered truth from someone who wanted nothing from him was the most precious gift imaginable. And as he drove through Seoul's glittering darkness, back toward the empire that suddenly felt less like an achievement and more like a cage, Ji-hun Kim allowed himself to feel something he'd abandoned decades ago. Hope.